For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, alongside Chris Treviño for instant analysis from USC's Tuesday evening practice of Notre Dame week. It's officially rivalry week for the first time this year so far. Chris, so why don't you get us started off with some rivalry weather?
Yes, of course. It's windy right now, and obviously we're going to the Windy City, so that's a good start for USC to get used to that. Obviously, it'll be a little bit rainy over there in Illinois, Chicago, so you'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, a little chilly today, Jack. We had the red and blue going on. You were smart with the long sleeve, but I would say it's still a great weather day for practice.
What were some of your biggest practice observations from today?
Obviously, USC got really banged up in the Arizona win, so you wanted to see who was going to come out to practice. You know, Domani Jackson was fully dressed out. Zach Branch was fully dressed out. But remember, you know, Zach Branch was dressed out all last week, but did not play in the game. But it is a positive sign to see them come out dressed in full pads for practice. Jacoby Covington came dressed out. Branch and Roland-Wallace came dressed out. Eric Gentry came dressed out. So a lot of the guys that did get nicked up did come out fully dressed in practice for full pads. So I think that is a positive sign going into, obviously, a very big game in South Bend.
Yeah, talking with Lincoln Riley after two, he said it was good to have some of those guys back at practice, but he mentioned Branch and Roland-Wallace as two guys that weren't full participants during practice, but did say that Jackson was a full participant. So it seems like, you know, if all is well, by the end of the week, it seems like Domani Jackson should be back. And USC has been struggling a little bit with depth at corner. That was an area that was really hit during the game on Saturday, and Riley was asked about that immediately and whether they're going to need to move around some guys. What was your take on what you saw in practice as well as what Lincoln had to say about that?
First off, he did compliment Prophet Brown, the young guy who was thrown into action in the game, and I thought played really well, you know, up and down a little bit, was in position to make that tackle for a loss with Mason Cobb on the big stand in the triple overtime. But yeah, they have been banged up. He mentioned that that's been a position group that has really had trouble getting healthy or staying healthy, and they haven't had guys be able to play together for most of the season just because so many guys are getting banged up and playing through different things. So he was really preaching that, you know, you hope to get some continuity there. You know, finally get guys back. You need to get them back on the field. Domani Jackson, you did say they were hopeful they were going to have him back, so that is a big start. But they could be without a couple guys. We don't know yet. We'll have to see throughout the week. But this is a very versatile defensive back room. That's why they recruit these guys that are more versatile, that guys can play inside, outside safety. Traycon Fagans is a good example. He came in starting as a cornerback, and now he's been learning the safety position. Jalen Smith has cornerback experience. I believe he played a little bit in college when he first got here, and then he did some in high school as well, so he has experience there. We know Kalen Bullock has a little bit of cornerback experience, so they have the versatility to move guys around. And don't forget the freshman, Mekhi Lemon, was actually rated as an athlete coming out of high school, and a lot of people thought, hey, he might actually be a pretty good cornerback in college, and that's a guy, if they need, they can throw him out there for depth if it gets that dire. But again, it's an interesting spot where they're in. They're getting Domani back, it sounds like, but you have to keep an eye out for Roland-Wallace and Jacoby Covington. But it was nice that Prophet Brown did get some reps under his belt in a big moment, so he should be more prepared going to South Bend.
Another big observation from practice, we get to see the punt drills, the kickoff drills every day. Sometimes they get monotonous, but this time we saw a big change where they had, you know, a USC staffer had one of those kind of almost weed insecticide sprayer things filled with water. He was chasing after the punt returners. There's a video on my Twitter, you can go watch it. He's running after them, spraying water on the punt returners as they're trying to catch and return punts. You would assume in hopes to simulate a rainy environment in South Bend. We talked with Max Williams about a potential rain game as well, and he said that the entire week in practice so far they've been playing with dampened footballs. He said he didn't know about it, and so when a football was coming his way that he tried to intercept during practice, it slipped through his hands. Whether that was yesterday, today, not quite sure, but they're playing with wetted footballs to try and simulate, as well as the sprayer. It was pretty entertaining to watch. What are some of your takeaways from USC prepping for the rain?
I just hope with that insecticide weed killer spray, I hope it was brand new. I just hope it was brand new. It wasn't used. They didn't get it from USC facilities department and just say, give me something old. No, I hope it was brand new. But yeah, it was really interesting to see. I haven't seen that before. I know the past staff, I feel like they would just dunk the balls in a cold tub or something like that. So it is a little bit interesting of a twist. You know, not a lot of these guys are SoCal natives, so maybe not really used to the rain. I asked Max Williams about that. He had to stop and think if he's ever played in a rain game. He said the game against Arizona State in the COVID year, he thinks it was raining a little bit, but yeah, a lot of these guys, SoCal guys, used to really nice weather all the time, so it's going to be an interesting test when they go into South Bend, which I believe has like a 97% chance of rain. So I'm going to be on the field. Jack, I hope you're on the field with me, but I'm going to be soaked a little bit, but it's going to be an interesting game, and maybe a game we'll see USC run more, but it's definitely good to see that they're focusing on the little things and, you know, prepping prepping the balls, getting them dampened, all those things, because that's what's going to make the difference in a game like this.
Yeah, USC had a little bit of rain in Dante Williams' first game as interim head coach at Washington State in 2021. You'd have to go back all the way to 2016 versus Notre Dame in the Coliseum. Fans will remember that game pretty fondly. Adoree Jackson, 3 touchdowns. That was USC's last game against Notre Dame in the rain, and they've really only had one slightly rainy game since then. So it's been a while since the Trojans have played in the rain. Really the big headline today, and we've been beating around it a little bit, Lincoln Riley was talking with us, and he was asked a question about the defense and the way that the media has been portraying the defense and his thoughts after Caleb Williams spoke up in defense of the defense, and he gave a almost like 2-minute long impassioned speech, talking long enough that when he was finished, he's like, oh, I bet you guys didn't think you were going to get that much from me, but it really was a lot from Lincoln Riley speaking and really seemed like showing his true feelings about this defense.
It felt like it kind of carried over from his responses on Saturday and Caleb's responses on Saturday. And he did note, he did admit, it is a little bit of venting of frustration that he has towards, people that have this perception of the defense. And he mentioned, the media. He said, everyone in the media had this notion, and then he kind of corrected himself. He said, okay, I won't generalize, but a lot of people out there had this idea that the first time something went bad with USC's defense, it was going to be, oh, they should have done this, or they should have changed that, which I felt was like an indirect response to the people that were crying for Alex Grinch to get fired. Obviously, it was a big talking point after the Tulane game, after the whole offseason, that they should have made a change. I think he was kind of indirectly addressing that they should have made a big change. What's a bigger change than DC? So I feel like he was addressing that a little bit, but he said they have made improvements. They're not an improved defense in terms of you're looking at the tackles for loss, the pressure rate, the sack rate, all those kinds of things. And, he said this is a defense he feels like is in position to hit their exponentially high ceiling. This is a team he thinks can improve fast down the second half stretch. Now, again, we're at 6 games in, Jack, and I know USC fans are clamoring for just some sort of sign for life that defense is going to get better. Lincoln Riley said he sounded like he's expecting this defense to get better fast during the second half of the season. And I just got to say, they better, because this is the tough part of the season. You're going against Washington, Utah, Oregon. Your defense has to come ready to play. Your defense has to improve based on what we've seen the last few weeks. And again, if they play similar to what they played in the first half of that Colorado game, I think a lot of USC fans would be happy. That's a defense that will get you in position to go undefeated down the stretch and get to the college football playoff. But we just haven't seen that consistency. So consistency obviously is a big thing. Busted plays are a big thing. And he said, they are going to own the things they have to improve. I would assume that's busted coverages, missed tackles, because the missed tackles are still a big thing. But yeah, he came to the USC's defense once again in an impassioned speech and, showed a little fire there, a little frustration, because, I'm sure he's tired of hearing at it. We saw him during the scout team offense portion. He was working on the side with the defense. I think he knows that this is a big week for the defense. They have to come out and show some things. He talked about how, the defense, if they hadn't screwed up that field goal, special teams hadn't screwed up that field goal, we'd be talking about how the defense only gave up 11 points throughout the rest of the game. But since, they went to overtime, they scored, back and forth, it all became the score of the game. Everyone was looking at that. They were not talking about how the defense held in the fourth quarter and allowed them to win on a field goal. But they botched the field goal, so that's what everyone was talking about. So he pointed that out. It's kind of the same thing we've heard on Saturday. But again, just a little frustration coming out from him, defending his defense. And he's talking about every one of those 4 walls are geared towards playing good football in the second half of the season. Everyone is moving towards that same goal. So again, we're going to see South Bend. That's where things kick off for this defense. If they can kind of get back on the right track, and Lincoln Riley's doubling down. So we'll see. We'll see, Jack.
Yeah, fans should remember, too, the game against Notre Dame last year was one of the defense's best. It felt like they responded pretty well. Drew Pine ended up having a lot of yards there. Michael Mayer had a nice day, and by the end, the point total didn't really represent it because there were some garbage time scores, and then Caleb Williams had to go and score one more time on offense. But for the majority of that game, they held the Notre Dame offense in check. They had a couple turnovers. They played pretty well when it came to getting stops and forcing punts. So that was one of USC's better games, and this Notre Dame offense has been struggling as of late. They lost to Louisville, they lost to Ohio State, and they barely just squeaked past Duke, and it really wasn't the offense that was the reason. So there definitely is potential for USC to maybe stifle this Notre Dame offense a little bit more, but also with what we've seen from the defense these last couple years, there also is a world where this is a get-right game for Notre Dame's offense, so we'll really see that on Saturday. But you're right, it was probably the most impassioned that Lincoln Riley has been in defense of his defense. We also got to talk to defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. He was asked about comments Lincoln Riley made last night on Trojans Live, his radio show, when he was saying that early in the game against Arizona, Alex Grinch made the perfect calls calls and basically said, like, if you could pick exactly what you wanted to do against Arizona's offensive calls, we had those calls in place, and the players just kind of messed it up a little bit. There were some things that got mixed up, and that's what allowed the big plays to happen. That's what allowed the scores to happen. So Grinch was asked about that comment. What did you have to take away from that?
Yeah, he kind of said it was kind of little things that ended up being the difference in those plays. And obviously, it's a game of football, it's a game of inches. Max Williams said something similar too, that it's the little things, guys messing up a little bit here and there, one person not doing their job. We've heard that saying a lot of people throughout the offseason with coaches, defense or an offense is one person doing their job. All 11 have to do their job for it to succeed. And it sounds like they were kind of saying that, one person wasn't doing the job or a couple people weren't doing the job. But it was the little things, you call it's 3rd and 2 and they get 2.5 yards, or it's 3rd and 9 and they get 9.5 yards. And there's those little things. But I thought that was an interesting question, because I think for the most part, we're also thinking about those plays where USC gave up a lot more than 9 yards. They gave up 15 yards on a 3rd and 2, or 20 yards. We're thinking more about those plays, not the little ones. But he did hark back to that, it just being little things, miscommunications, not doing their job. And again, you're hoping that that's something that USC players and the Alex Grinch can get right as they work towards putting on a much better effort in South Bend.
Yeah, they did give up some big plays, and we talked about that on tunnel vision. Like the first touchdown that was allowed, it seemed like it was an all-out pressure. Kalen Bullock was in the wrong place, and USC expected Mason Cobb to travel with Jacob Cowing down the middle of the field. I don't know if Lincoln Riley is talking about that as one of the right calls, but certainly didn't seem like it, considering Cobb's a linebacker, Cowing's one of the best wide receivers in the conference, so that doesn't seem like who you would want on him in that situation. There was the tight end touchdown where it was Jameel Muhammad in coverage on the play, where in my opinion that wouldn't be the perfect call, but it's hard to tell exactly which plays Lincoln Riley is talking about, because he didn't point him out specifically, but it's definitely something to think about. Lincoln Riley was also asked about Notre Dame and comparing this team to last year's team that came into the Coliseum. He's not a big fan of comparison, but he did say Notre Dame is a good football team. They're good at running the ball. They have a good offensive line. They've got a great defense, and he thinks that Sam Hartman, the quarterback, has really energized them as a group. What did you take away from his comments on Notre Dame?
Yeah, obviously, one of the big issues with Notre Dame last year is they didn't really have a stable quarterback, even though, USC defense allowed Drew Pine to look like a really good quarterback. But Sam Hartman, the number one transfer quarterback in the country last year via our rankings, and then came out of Wake Forest, an experienced guy, can make plays. He hasn't had his 2 best games back-to-back. He's coming off a 3-interception performance in that loss to Louisville, so he's looking for a get-right game, as you alluded to. But yeah, they're built on their defense. Marcus Freeman, defensive coordinator. If you have a good defense, a really good quarterback who has energized them, as you say, they're very dangerous. And obviously they're playing in South Bend, so they're going to have a good running game. USC is going to have to go up against another big physical running back. So this is a really interesting test. Their defense is really good. USC's offense is really good. USC is at that disadvantage when it comes to their offense versus their defense. So the defense does have to give USC's offense a little bit more than it's shown in the last couple of weeks. They play, similar to what they did in the middle of that Arizona game. I think this is going to be a really interesting opportunity for USC to go in there and get that win. But again, can't give up those big plays. Notre Dame's offense isn't a world beater. Don't let them look like a world beater. That's got to be the message for Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley and these guys. They have a chance to go in there and put up some points, but they also have to limit some points, just some points. It doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be good enough to walk out of South Bend with a win. They're first since 2011. You probably weren't even bored, Jack.
I was born, I think just slightly born before 2011. One of the ways that I think USC's defense could take advantage of Notre Dame's offense comes in a way that most people aren't thinking, because Notre Dame, of course, they've got Joe Ald at left tackle. Everyone thinks it's such a great offensive line. The last 2 weeks, they've really struggled in pass protection. 39 pressures in the last 2 weeks on Sam Hartman. That's the most for any quarterback in the country, most allowed by any offensive line in the country. USC, obviously, I think they're number 1 in the nation in tackles for loss. They're still top 5 in sacks, top 5 in pressure rate. So that is one area where if USC can force Notre Dame to pass, if they get up by enough and Sam Hartman's going to be passing, you've got Solomon Byrd, Jameel Muhammad, Braylon Shelby, Romello Height, all these different edge rushers that have a chance to tee off on Hartman, and that's been an area that Notre Dame has been struggling with these past couple of weeks. So there are ways, whether it's the turnover game, the sack game, the TFL game, stopping the run, where USC could take advantage of a slumping Notre Dame offense, but kind of say the other side, Notre Dame could take advantage of a slumping USC defense as well, and that's kind of just football sometimes, but it feels like it's a little bit different in this matchup with the way that these two teams match up as a whole. But do you have any more thoughts from today's practice before we head on to tomorrow and then into South Bend?
Yeah, one thing that Alex Grinch said that I thought was interesting is actually the first thing that he said was going back to trust. He felt like in the first part of that game, USC's defenders and defense weren't trusting each other. They weren't trusting the man behind them. They weren't trusting the man in front of them. And you need trust when you're playing football. You need to trust that the guy next to you is going to do the job, or the guy behind you is going to do the job. And he felt like some of that wasn't happening out there on that field. And then he mentioned, when your back's against the wall, like USC's was in that game, that's when you really start to trust, because that's the only thing you can do, Jack. That's the only thing you can do is like, all right, we're already here. Let's start trusting each other. And he wants to get them to a point where they can do that when their backs are not against the wall. So that was a really interesting comment. I thought, they have to fall back to their coaching, that they have to trust their coaching, the stuff they do on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. You're not seeing that necessarily out on the field on Saturdays. So they got to get them to fall back to that trusting of everything they're doing in practice week leading up to the game. So they're getting a little sloppy in that regard and not kind of trusting each other out there. So I thought that was a really interesing point he made.
Yeah, our backs aren't exactly to a wall, and I trust you to do your job. You do a great job, Chris, on instant analysis. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's all we've got for you guys today. It'll be me and Connor tomorrow. I'll trust Connor to do his job. I'm sure he won't let me down either, and we'll get you instant analysis from USC's Wednesday practice. Make sure you're checking out the YouTube site here. We'll have all the interviews from today. Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch, Jalen Smith, I believe Jameel Muhammad, and Max Williams. There's a bunch, and there will be a bunch tomorrow, hopefully including USC quarterback Caleb Williams and USC offensive line coach Josh Henson. Make sure you're going to the website, too, to check out all the articles. But anyways, for Chris Treviño, I'm Jack Smith. Check out USCfootball.com for more.